Looking for some unique ways to add a little zhuzh to your cards? Well, today I have got 21 fabulous ideas how to create just a simple background for your focal images on your cards. Are you ready to learn how? Let's get started with today's Tuesday tip. Welcome everybody. I'm Connie Stewart with SimplySimpleStamping.com. I am really excited to share some great ways. Let's zhuzh up those cards and create something amazing. One of my favorite methods is just to randomly stamp all over a piece of cardstock. Now you notice that I'm kind of rotating my cardstock. I want it to have that really random feel. And I do hear from some of you that random is hard. So this is probably one of my favorite tips to make sure you get that random look. But you can see by doing this, I have got a fabulous background to a card. And just like we did here, I also love to use words as the background. But with words, I do like to kind of have a specific pattern versus random. So you can see I started right there in the middle. I'm now going to kind of go right in between my spaces. Make sure you leave yourself about a half an inch on these. I think it just looks better. But can you see this fantastic background that we were able to create? And just like that, you've got another fabulous background. How about another one using stamps? Background stamps are fantastic because they're going to fill up the entire card, one stamp, one time. So I'm using the Rays of Light stamp, and you notice how I have stamp side up and I'm tapping my ink pad to the stamp. Now this is my favorite method for working with these background stamps. I like to lay my cardstock right on top. I'm just going to use some copy paper, but you could use your grid paper, whatever you have. And you see I'm just giving that cardstock a nice back rub. And of course, when we lift it, we get a really fun background. So you can see here with these images, we stamped in colored cardstock. Let's take it up a notch, and we are going to use our basic white craft pad. Now guys, this gives a whole different look. Now craft ink is very different. It's very thick. So it's not going to adhere the same way that our water-based ink will. But you can see the color, the white, just really pops right off the cardstock. Now this one I'm doing it in Daffodil Delight with these great flowers, but I want you to see what it looks like on a dark color. So this is what it looks like when it's on Night of Navy. Absolutely beautiful. Now I said we stepped it up a notch here. Let's step this one up a notch, and I'm going to bring in some clear embossing powder. So I'm going to sprinkle this on, and it's going to make those flowers just kind of shimmer and shine. Now, if you wanted those to be bright white, you could also bring in your white embossing powder. But let's see what we get. I'm going to take my heat tool. I'm going to warm it up for about 20-30 seconds. I'm going to keep that about 5 inches or so away from my image. And you notice how I just keep moving my heat tool around. What I'm doing is I'm melting that embossing powder. And it's going to leave a beautiful shiny image behind. And stick around, I've got another technique that I can share with you once you've embossed it. And what do you think? Do you see that beautiful shimmer and shine? By the way, I could have done that to the one here on Night of Navy as well. It doesn't matter the color, but it just really gives a great look. Now, if you decide to just leave it with the craft ink and nothing else, you're going to want to give this some time to dry. It's a thick ink, and once you dry it, it's not going to smear. It's going to be great, but just make sure before you go and start adding it to your cards and things that you give that some good drying time. All right, now I said I've got a tip and a trick to share with you as of ways you can really make these flowers pop. Let's bring in an ink pad, and I'm just going to go over these flowers. And can you see the difference? Look at how that just pops. What a great way to add a background to your card bases. And it's got such a great wow factor. Once you've done that, you're going to want to come in with a paper towel, or I just keep this little microfiber cloth here in my stamp room. And we're just going to buff that because we want to bring back that shine in our flowers. You see, it just kind of removes just any of that ink that might be sitting there on that embossed image. And just like that, we've got another really great background to our next card. Blending brushes are another fantastic way to add a wonderful background. Let's use a little boho blue. And you are going to want some grid paper or some scratch paper kind of there next to you, because you notice how I just ink up the brush. I want to get some of that off because it gets really, really dark. Again, you can do whatever shape you want, but I'm going to go with an oval. And you can just lightly blend. One thing I like to tell you about blending brushes, you can always add more, but you can't take it away. So that's why I always dab off a little bit first. So get some of that harsh off. And look at that beautiful and soft background a blending brush will give you. By the way, you can use the large or the small, whichever works for you. Of course, then you can just take your stamped image and go right next to that. A simple sentiment, you're ready to go. Let's work with those blending brushes a little bit more, and I'm going to teach you some masking techniques. This is just a piece of copy paper, and it is cut the same size as my cardstock. So whatever size you're going to be using, cut a piece of copy paper, not cardstock. You need it to be thin. By the way, junk mail is a great use right here because it doesn't matter what this is. It's just going to be used as a template. I'm going to do circles today, so you can either use a circle punch or circle dies. This would be the stylish shapes. This is my 2 3/8 inch circle punch, whichever you want. How about we go big or go home? Let's take that giant die. And I'm going to set mine here kind of up in the upper section, so I have a space down here where I could stamp my sentiment. Let's run this through our die cutting machine and die cut this circle. All right, now we have that. So we have this die cut circle. Hold on to it. I'm going to teach you another technique with that one. But I'm going to bring in, remember, this is the copy paper. This is the cardstock. They are the same size. So I'm going to bring in my ink pad one more time. Remember, we ink it off, dab a little bit off of there. And I'm just going to use that template. You notice I'm just holding it in place. If you're concerned about it staying in place, because I know for some people that can be tough, you could just add a couple Post-it notes just to ensure that's not going to move around. Let's keep going in that circle. And now when I remove that mask, look at what we have now. All right, let's have some fun. Let's bring in our stamp one more time. And that is a totally different look. I mean, that was fast, right? Just super easy to work with those blending brushes. I'm going to bring in that mask again. And instead of blending brushes, what if we just stamped our focal image? We can just stamp this randomly all around our circle. Now, when we remove this, we get something like this. So I think that's really beautiful. All right, now we're going to do some reverse masking. So we're going to take that circle, we're going to place it here in the middle of our cardstock. We're going to bring in that blending brush. Remember, get some of that off of there. You know what? I think for this one, actually, I'm going to use the smaller one because I want to get in kind of tight here. So just gently adding that ink just around to the outside. And we get something like this. Now, let's say we wanted to fill in all of this. We could easily come in and add ink all the way around. We can come back in with our focal image stamp and our sentiment, and that gives a very different look. How about one more masking technique? So I'm going to use the stamp. I'm going to center up that circle. And now I will just stamp all around. Make sure you're touching the circle. And let's see what we have now. Fantastic. I could put a great big sentiment in there. So get creative with using your dies or your punches and create some really great masking and reverse masking techniques. Embossing folders are a super fast way to create instant background on your cards, but I've got some different ways that you can use them. I think we all know this method, which is just where we put our cardstock right there into the embossing folder and run it through our machine. Boom, we get that really great embossed image, right? Well, let's talk about some additional ways you can use your embossing folders. What if you only wanted part of your cardstock to be embossed? Well, if we want it on this side, that's pretty easy. We can just take our embossing folder, set it right there, run it through the machine. This is the only area that's going to emboss. But if you're like me, I really like that to be over here on the left side. So I'm going to teach you how to do that. There's my score line. I can place my cardstock in the folder, kind of decide how far over you want it to go. Now, I had a problem with this. I can't see my score line. So here's a tip. Take a Post-it note, something that you can see, and I'm just going to put it right there on the score line. Don't worry about it. We're not going to be hitting it. But now when I close my embossing folder, look at that. I can see right where that score line is, and that is important. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up. I like to use this line right here on the folder as a guide. Of course, now I can see this is how much of my card will be embossed. I'm going to bring in my machine, and I got base plate 1. I'm going to bring in my cardstock and my embossing folder, and here's what we need to do with our plate. I'm going to slide it in here. See that Post-it note? I'm going to line up the plate with that Post-it note. Now watch what happens when I run this through my machine. We'll remove that Post-it note. Hey, look at that. We did partial embossing. This is just a little bonus tip, but I always like to cover up that seam. So I've got a piece of designer series paper. I just simply added some multi-purpose glue right there. Snip that away. And that kind of hides that and really gives a fantastic look. All right, let's do another tip with embossing. And this one, we're going to ink up our embossing folder. So I have got a gray granite ink pad and some gray granite cardstock. You want to ink up the side that has the Stampin' Up! Logo. And what you're going to do is very gently tap, okay? You can also drag, but if you do, you want to do it very gently, all right? We don't want to get too much ink. This is just going to add just a little bonus look, all right? So lightly tap. Of course, you can see that everything is inked. I'm going to lay my cardstock on the uninked side. Of course, this will be the front, right? And you got one shot at this. So we want to make sure our edge of our card is right there on the edge of the folder. We're going to bring this over. Now, you can't let it move. You're going to want to hold on to that. Let's run this through our machine. All right, just again, base plate 1, embossing plate 4. We will run that through. And I'm going to show you what we get. Look at that. Wow, such a beautiful technique. Now, what to do with this? You're just going to go rinse this under the sink, cool water. It's going to be fine and you're going to be good to go. So another really great way to use your embossing folders to create an even more detailed image. Now, I'm just going to flip this inside out because I do want to show you one more tip. You could also come in with those blending brushes. And let me show you what this looks like. Now, keep in mind, on the other side now of the embossing folder. And I'm just lightly adding, of course, this is a good vintage, distressed kind of embossing folder. So, you know, just kind of play around. It's always good to practice on scrap too. Just grab some scrap paper, junk mail. You know how I love to work with junk mail. But that is another technique that you can add. So if you want it big and bold, ink up your embossing folder. If you want it a little bit softer, just use your blending brushes. I've got one more embossing folder technique I want to teach you. I'm going to go ahead and run this piece of cardstock through my machine. And for this one, we're going to bring that white ink pad back in. So I'm going to show you a few different ways you can add some color to these embossed images. So you can come in with your blending brushes, which we kind of did earlier. Now this blending brush, this is one I strictly use for white. I would never want this white, any of that white that could be on this brush to get into any other color. And I'm just going to lightly blend that onto these flowers. If you didn't have blending brushes, you know what? A sponge dauber will work great as well. Again, light touches. In fact, I gotta tell you, I think I like the sponge dauber best on this one, don't you? I love it when I learn right along with you. All right, yeah, I really like the look of the sponge dauber. All right, shall we go crazy and see what would happen if we lightly tapped our ink pad? I have no idea what it'll do. Well, I don't like it, so yeah, I don't think I like that one. No, but I guess depending on the folder, that actually might end up looking good, but I don't think I'm crazy about it here. Sponge dauber for the win. Now, I know it's impossible to remember all 21 of those techniques, but good news, I've got a free download that goes along with today's video. It has all of the techniques listed for you, and you can find that for free at simplysimplestamping.com, or look down in the YouTube description. I've got a direct link to the post, and that's where you'll find that free download. I'd love for you to have that. Let's talk about using some dies. I love to create with dies, and what I liked about this set, this is the Lights Aglow. And yeah, it might look a little Christmassy, but let me show you what I'm going to do on a piece of fresh freesia. Base plate 1, thin die adapter 2, cutting plate 3. And this is kind of its own background die, all right? So this isn't going to cut this circle through. It's going to leave me a really great die cut image in the background. Let me show you. I'm going to add that top cutting plate. Now, when you run this one through, it's got a lot of detail. I'm going to recommend you run it through about 3 or 4 times. And look at what we get. Looks like I've got just a few of my little dots. I just need to push those out. There's lots of them in my die. Just give it a tap there on your table. They will all come out. And what a fantastic background dies like these can create. Friends, we've got Stampin' Up! Has several different dies that are going to be able to create these fantastic backgrounds to your cards. Border dies are another great way to add some really great background looks. How about we take this fancy little die? I'm just going to place it right here on the edge of my card. I'll run that through my machine. And let's see what we get. Oh my goodness, look at that gorgeous, elegant edge to our card. Let's do another edge technique, and it's one you don't need anything special for. I am just simply going to take my cardstock and I'm going to give it a tear. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tear in little spurts, and I want to kind of rotate in and out. I want it to have a really nice random feel. The key is just those little spurts. All right, we have a really nice border. And you know what we can do with this? Because we don't like to waste anything. What if we were to take that other torn edge, put it about right here, and I'll cover up that seam just with some cardstock. Of course, you'll stamp on that. Guys, that's another way to create a really fun and unique background. This one's especially great when you're creating masculine cards. Torn edge, it's easy to do and you don't need anything special but your fingers. Now, I do love die cutting, so I want to teach you how to use some of your die cuts to create 2 different types of backgrounds on your cards. So I had this scrap piece of bubble bath, and you can see I got about 9 of these flowers out of that piece, and I could just add these to a piece of bubble bath. Again, it's monochromatic. It's really, really pretty. By the way, because they're flowers, I could even come in and still keep it monochromatic by adding the centers to the flowers. But you know what? Maybe you'd rather use those as polka dots. That can be really fun too. So you could just adhere these. Of course, I'd snip off any that are on the sides, but we could take those same flowers or whatever images you're choosing to use, and we could add, instead of going monochromatic, We could add them to a card base. Again, you could take the little centers, you could use them as polka dots, you could use them as centers to your flowers. Now here I use die cuts. Guys, you could also use your punches. Maybe you could cover this in different circle punches. Get creative, but this is such a great and quick way to add a beautiful background to your next card. Let's say you don't have embossing folders, not a problem. Did you know that your Simply Scored board can also create a great embossed image? I am just going to take my stylus tool. You can decide how much embossing you want to do. I'm going to do this at every 1/4 of an inch, but you can get creative in how much embossing you want to add. Get those embossing lines good and deep by going over them a few times. But look at that, we've got a really great look to the background of our next card, just simply using our Simply Scored board. Thanks so much for joining me today. I hope that the techniques were useful to you. If you like the video, I would love a thumbs up on YouTube. Thank you so much for that. And if you haven't subscribed, why not subscribe to the channel? I share twice a week, and I'd love to have you join in. Have a great day, everybody. Can't wait to see you next time. Bye-bye.